will be working on a 2001 Pontiac Grand Prix. This has the 3.8 liter engine, and we will be replacing the valve cover gaskets here on the front and on the back. And then I'm also going to be replacing the upper intake manifold gaskets, along with replacing the serpentine belt and all the fuel injector O-rings. So stay tuned and I will guide you on how to replace all these. All right, so first thing you'll want to do here is removing this bracket here. You have a 10 millimeter bolt right here, and then there's a 16 millimeter nut right here. So in order to remove the alternator, first thing you need to do is disconnect your battery. I recommend disconnecting the ground first. Next, you will need to remove your belt. So this is a tensioner right here. You take a 15 millimeter wrench and put it on here, and then you pull upward on the wrench. After you're done with that, you will come down here with that same 15 millimeter wrench, loosen this bolt. You're okay to remove it now. And then same thing with this bolt here and this bolt here. Remove all three of those bolts and your alternator will be free. Next, you'll come to the back of the alternator and disconnect your power leads to it, and then this will just lift right up and pull out. Once you get it raised, you can disconnect the other harness that is connected to it. Once you have all three of those bolts removed, move your wires, you lift up on the alternator, and there's a clip on the side here. Just remove it, just pull out on it a little bit and pull back. Do not pull on the wires, they'll probably come out of the clip, and then your alternator is ready to be pulled out. Alright, so once you have your alternator removed, you'll want to remove this bracket that the tensioner is on. If your tensioner is bad, which I believe this one is seizing up, you'll want to replace this. So in order to remove this here, make sure you have a catch pan underneath the vehicle, or drain the coolant from the radiator as I did. You'll want to remove this here. This is a 15 millimeter, also a 15 millimeter down here, and then we'll see if I can show you, but there's another one right there. Remove all three of those bolts. Once they are removed, you'll come over to this pipe here. Use like a large flathead or a small pry bar and slowly sort of try to work that pipe out of the intake there, and then do the same thing at the bottom here. You'll pry out and try to slowly work this out of the vehicle. So I noticed on a lot of people's videos that they are not showing how to remove this bracket. They're just showing you how to clean and install the valve cover gasket, which in itself is easy, but getting to it and having the accessibility you need is a pain in the ass. So I have the coolant drained. There's probably still more in here. So I have a catch pan underneath it. I'm going to take a pry bar. I'm going to set it right underneath this neck here and try to see if I can push and work it loose. Make sure you do not press against your intake. These are plastic and you would crack it and have to replace all that. Alright, so here I have it all pulled out. It is important to clean all this really well. The gasket is definitely deteriorated. You can see it piecing up there. Same thing with the larger one down there. Alright, so now to this bracket. This bracket is a bit of a pain in the ass. I was originally just going to replace these O-rings here and here. You can purchase new elbows for these. They stock come as plastic elbows. These have already been converted to metal. What I did, because they do not offer just the O-ring, is I ordered both of the plastic elbows, which was about $12 for both of them. I'll share the part with you. And then I'm gonna have to remove each elbow from here. So as you can see here, I marked it. Same thing with the bottom down here. I'm going to remove each elbow and replace the O-ring that is right on the inside here. Here is the part that I will be pulling the O-ring off of. So you can see that that one's a little larger, and so is this one. So that purple O-ring will go on here. I'll pull it out, put the orange ones on there as well, and I'll do the same thing for the top here. So I'm not going to be using these plastic elbows. I'm going to reuse the metal ones, but you can only purchase those O-rings in this kit. They don't sell them separately. So hopefully that helps. The part number on it is right up there in the top corner, 47065. They do offer these in metal at the part store as well. They're about $12.99 a fitting. And if you have not converted over to metal already, then I recommend not buying these plastic ones and just buying the metal ones. Alright, so make sure you mark these before removing them. I'm going to just twist them and pull. So that one came off easily. Make sure that you don't wipe away your markings so you can line them up. Right. This second one was a lot harder to get off. I did remove them by hand with a lot of pulling and twisting. I do not recommend using tools on these because you will damage these. They're just aluminum and they're very light duty. Looks like I'll have a lot of cleaning to do. All of this is hardened on there. There's no really easy way to clean this out, so I have a bit on the end of my drill. And that got all of that silicone or whatever that is in there. Might even be gasket material.
You put way in that hole that I was working on. And then it might whip.
So as it's important to clean these fittings here, you also want to come over here, and I'm using a battery terminal, a wire brush, and I'm lifting it up and trying to clean it level so that nothing can fall in there. And just spinning it until it looks clean in here. You could use a vacuum on the end of it, or you could use some brake cleaner to rinse it all out. So I went ahead and applied a little bit of anti-seize to the 3 bolts here. They were pretty rough coming out. I was a little concerned that they could break coming out. These get torqued down. This one, and the one on the bottom side there get torqued down to 36 foot-pounds. Right. When doing the valve covers, it will be easiest to remove your ignition wires. So in order to do that, you'll need to know the firing order so you can put them back in the same place. I recommend, if you don't know it off the top of your head, to tape each one of them and then number them. So this is how they go. You got right here, starting here, 1, 3, 5, and then 2, 4, and 6. And then you'll see that these are also numbered. So in that order, you would put them all in. So 1, actually, this right here goes to this first plug right here. So, and it just goes 1, 3, 5, and then 2, 4, 6. All right, just a trick when removing these ignition wires. This metal piece comes off with the rubber boot, and using something like this to get on it, like so, and then prying out helps pop it off. The rear ones can be a big pain if you don't have any leverage and there's not a lot of space back there. Whatever you do, do not pull on these wires, because you will just end up destroying your ignition wires, and then you will have to replace them. Alright, so now we are going to remove the upper intake manifold. We are only replacing the upper intake gasket. When doing that, we'll also be replacing the injector O-rings and I'm also going to go through and replace all of the spark plugs. The wires are already new. One thing you'll want to do before trying to remove this is you'll go through and drain the antifreeze out of the system. You could just remove the plug on the bottom of the radiator and slowly drain it, because you do not have to remove all of it. In my case, I'm going to remove all of it and then replace all the coolant in the system with fresh coolant. And once I'm done with this, I will also be doing an oil change to top it off. Go through and unplug all of your injectors. You have a blue plug like this on all of them. It snaps down like that. So you would snap it up. I'll grab one that I already snapped. You'll snap it in the upward position like this. And then you just push your finger right on that black part there, and it'll pull up very easily. If it's not coming up easily, it means you need to pull up the blue part there a little bit further, because it should come out very easily. Once you have those removed, you can come over here to these bolts. There's going to be 4 nuts right on these studs. They are 10mm nuts. You'll remove all 4 of those, which will allow you to have some play in your fuel rail here, because we will be lifting this off. Next thing you'll want to do is come through and look at all of your electrical connections and start disconnecting things that are connected to your intake manifold. Leave the pressure in the system. You can remove this cap and then use the valve here to press it in, and it'll take the air out of the system. Once those 4 nuts are removed and your harnesses are disconnected and your fuel rails are disconnected, you can lift up on this railing and set it off to the side. So in order to remove this part of the fuel line here, you just press in on both the bottom tabs. You can see part of it right there, and then you'll separate them. Make sure that you release the fuel pressure in the lines first. So now go ahead and remove this bolt here. It's an 8mm, and then loosen up these clamps here so that you can remove part of your air cleaner. I have an aftermarket K&N filter on here. Next, you'll come over here and remove your throttle and your kickdown cable. You'll pull out on this. I already pulled it out. And then you'll push the plastic thing toward the engine and then pull out, and you'll have it right here. So keep in mind where it was. You can move this piece right here. You can mark it or just take note of where it was, because see those little teeth on there? You can actually keep it from sliding on them by pushing that in. Next, you'll want to go through and start removing any of the brackets and all of the bolts that are running along the outside of this upper manifold. These are all going to be 8mm, and some of the bracket bolts, like the one that is connected to, is a 10mm. Once you have the bracket that is surrounding the EGR valve removed, you can come over here to the vacuum line coming from the power booster all the way to the intake manifold, and you can squeeze on these tabs right here and then pull it out. And then that O-ring right there will actually be in your intake manifold kit, so you'll want to pull this off and replace it. So there will be a total of 10, 8, and 10mm bolts and nuts that are holding this upper intake manifold on, plus this 8mm bracket here and your cables. You'll have to take note of the length of the manifold bolts. The longer ones go through the thicker plastic, and then everything else along these sides here are the exact same length. And there we have it. This is going to take a bit to clean. There are actually pine needles inside the intake manifold, which is pretty awesome. Then I will show you the lower manifold here. Alright, so I'm going to be using this here just to skim the top of the intake, because there is all kinds of nasty debris on it. I don't even know what that is. It's not oil. It looks like almost burnt coal or something. But I'm going to clean it all off with this just by sliding it to the edge. I'm going to slide it outward to help keep it clean. I'll show you here the reason that I am doing this upper intake manifold. So I have oil just sitting on the lower intake, so it's just puddling up here. So I'm replacing this because this gasket right here was leaking, and then along with this rear valve cover gasket, so I figured I might as well just do them both. I'm going to use some of these pads here. I'm going to come through and just scrub everything just to wipe off where the gasket's going to seal at. Then when I'm all done, I will go through with some brake cleaner and a rag and wipe up everything. So along with doing the upper intake, the kit came with a new thermostat gasket, and also it came with new gaskets for the actual intake manifold here in the throttle body. So I will be pulling this apart as well and replacing any of the gaskets that need to be replaced on this. It'll take me a bit to clean it. It is super gunky and nasty. So we are going to take off this side cover for the throttle body. It looks like they are 10mm bolts, so there should be 4 of them. Reason we're taking this off is because the intake kit came with new gaskets for this. So we'll try to, I'm going to use that impact. When you're tightening anything down on this upper intake, you have to be careful to actually torque it to whatever the specifications are, because the whole thing is plastic and easy to break. So there are a total of 3 bolts holding this on. So there you have that. So I'm going to clean up all this surface area. This would be a perfect time to clean this as well. There's a ton of buildup in there. And then here is the gasket we will be replacing. Once I replace this and torque this down, we'll go ahead and replace the thermostat before we reinstall this. So I have everything cleaned up here. The torque specifications for all of the bolts going through the plastic and to the lower intake is 89 inch-pounds. So all 3 of these bolts will be 89 inch-pounds right here. And then same thing for all of your mounting bolts here. So since I'm doing the intake and it comes with a new thermostat and gasket for it, I'm going to go ahead and replace this. In order to do this, you will need to pull off this housing right here, and it's just held on by 2 10mm bolts. I'm just going to pull this off, and with the hose you can set it off to the side. Make sure you take note of how the thermostat is placed inside there, and you'll reinstall your new thermostat and gasket in the same position that the current one is in. So I am ready to reinstall the intake. So in order to do that, I'm going to install it the same way I pulled it out. Set it here. Make sure all the wires are out of the way here. Keeping my fingers on the bottom so that I can tell the gasket's not moving. It does clip in, so it should not move easily. Make sure you have the holes somewhat positioned. It'll just slip right down. So there you have it. Now I'm going to go ahead and reinstall all of the bolts around the perimeter here. and then I will tighten them by hand and go through the torque sequence of cross patterns of how to torque them. And now I'm going to use this tool here to go through and just if it's not spinning easily, then I'm not going to force it. And then I will just go through all of them. Alright, so I have all my bolts started. They're tightened down to the plastic but no tighter. And now I'm going to go through and torque them to 89 inch-pounds. I'll post a diagram on here to show you what order you need to torque them in. The EGR bracket here, make sure that you line up this hole here before putting your intake bolt down. So you just line them up, push it down in there, get that started. Start your other bolts before torquing this down. Right, so I went through and I torqued down all of the bolts. I did not actually torque all of them down to 89 inch-pounds. These two 10mm bolts on each side, and then this 8mm bolt here was not feeling right, so I decided to not torque them down all the way. You can do what you would like. They felt pretty snug, but I felt like the plastic was going to crack or something. So I will take my chances, and I will hopefully not regret it, but I did not torque them down. Next here, I'm going to remove the O-rings from these injectors. The kit also came with new rings, so I'm using this tool here, trying to be careful not to break anything. Once I get these removed, I'll go ahead and clean them off with some brake cleaner. Sort of just have to roll them off there. So do that to all 6 of them, and then we will get ready to reinstall this whole fuel rail. Alright, so now I'm going to reinstall my fuel rail. I have all of my new O-rings on here. They can only go on one direction. Make sure all your wires are out of your way. Line up the little post here. You want all of the injector wires on top of the railing so that you're not pinching them. And then line up all your injectors into the holes here. So I have them in there. So now I'm going to press down. I'm pressing down evenly on them so that I don't accidentally press one of the injectors, make it go sideways. Alright, and you know that you're all the way down once your brackets are metal on metal. And then you'll take your 4 nuts that hold the rail down. You can reinstall those. They're supposed to be torqued down to 89 inch-pounds. I don't believe it matters which order you torque these down in. And then I'll reconnect all the injectors. So since I have this all in place, I will go through and reconnect all of my harnesses here. They should only fit on one connector here, so should be pretty straightforward on what goes where. I did connect the fuel rails. I'm going to reconnect this fuel rail over here, and then I'm going to go through and make sure I hook up these vacuum lines again that are coming off of here. So just go through, make sure you get everything plugged in to where it needs to be plugged in, and then don't forget to add coolant and engine oil. Now we'll reconnect our throttle cables. You'll take this one here, make sure that the flat grooves right there are lined up with the metal. You'll notice that my gloves always seem to rip easily. So you just press that straight down like so. This tab goes on the outside here. Sort of when reinstalling this cable here, just pull it further than you need to, and you bend it down like this. Just line it right up like that. And there you go. That one's done. Now we'll take our other one. You actually want to snap it on this side first. So snap it on. Feels good. Does it? Go. Boom. And it should be good. So here's this vacuum line. It actually goes over the top here onto this. And then this goes here. And then you have, where's our other? This one here goes right into there. So there you have that. These wires now go over the top like they were before. Trying to make them come over to this side so we can strap them in here. And then we'll put this cover back on here. This will allow us to connect this harness in. Line all this up. Make sure these are up top here. And then press this in here. And then I'll go ahead and tighten all this down. Get that to where it's accessible. Let's see. Alright, and there we have it. Now we'll kick back over to that back side. Alright, so now I'm ready to swap out this gasket here. Just using my little hook here, pulling that off. It's pretty worn out. The kit came with 2 small gaskets, so just gonna pick which one seems to be best. So there's a smaller and a larger. Smaller one on here. Slipped on fine. And then you just press, you'll want to go under the wiring here. Find your hole. Alright, snaps in pretty easy once you get it lined up. I was just having a little technical difficulty there. And then there's a vacuum line on top of this hose. So locate your vacuum line and then plug it in to the top of it. Here we go. It's right here, and then just goes right on the top. So we have all of this connected. I'm ready to route my ignition wires back to the back side there. And then I'm going to start to reinstall the alternator. Alright, I realize that some of the stuff I'm doing is repetitive, but just to go over these one more time, you have 2, 4, 6, and on the front side, closest to me here, you have 1, 3, and 5. So I did label these, so I will just plug them back in the order that they need to go, and then we will place the alternator. So I'm going to reposition my alternator. First thing I want to do here is I'm going to plug in my harness on the bottom side. Then I'll pull my power lead out of the way. Next you'll want to position your brackets here. So you have 3 different bolts. The longest one goes here in the top right corner. You'll want to get everything started by hand before wrenching on them. So you get this one here, your the shortest one goes right here, and then your medium length one goes on the side next to your idler pulley. Get all those started, torque them down to 36 foot-pounds, reconnect your power. I believe the last thing I need to do is I need to remove my belt because I did plan to replace this, and I'm going to install my new serpentine belt, and then I will reconnect the battery and we'll fire this up after I top off the fluids.